Totally impossible. The propulsion system is a gravity propulsion system. The power source is an antimatter reactor. This technology does not exist at all.
The claims sounded like Hollywood sci-fi. Months later, when his identity was revealed, Bob Lazar said he worked at a secret facility near Groom Lake, where alien technology was being reverse engineered, that is, taken apart to figure out how it worked and whether the Pentagon could duplicate it. This is the simple drawing he made at the time.
Here now I had access and was permitted to view and look at the operation of this main level with the gravity amplifiers and the level below.
The premise seems less preposterous now. In a new documentary about Lazar, he describes in detail the spacecraft he worked on 30 years ago.
The craft that I worked on, that when it's going to travel a long distance, that is how it operates. It flies along and it puts its belly to the target and then brings all the amplifiers to power, and it shoots off in that direction. It doesn't fly as it would in the science fiction movies. It flies with the belly, the bottom forward.
Element 115 is a super heavy element. It's something that we've only just recently synthesized. We only made 4 atoms of it, but the craft uses larger quantities of it, 223-gram little triangles of it. But it's a unique element. When it's exposed to radiation, it produces its own gravitational field, its own anti-gravitational field, and it's what's used to lift and propel the craft and create distortions around it.
He's obviously very intelligent, and he obviously knows a lot about science. He knows a lot about propulsion systems, and he really did work at Los Alamos, which is interesting because he's actually on the employee roster. And they tried to say that he didn't. He knew people that were there. He knew the layout of the building. When he went there with George Knapp, they went through the building. He knew exactly where everything was, and he knew the people that worked there. So he really did work there, apparently, allegedly. His story, what's interesting to me is that, again, it's the same story over and over and over again. And then what's also interesting to me is that he knew and took friends to a place where they were testing these things out. And he knew where it was, and he knew when they were doing it, and he brought his friends out there, and that's when they got arrested. Let's tell the story about Bob real quick. Bob said he worked for Area S4, and he was hired to back engineer what they believe were alien crafts. Along the lines, he had this top secret clearance, and along the lines of all this happening, they're monitoring his phone calls. Turns out Bob's wife is having an affair. Bob doesn't know about this. They removed him from the project because they believe he'll be emotionally unstable. He's freaking out, not knowing that his wife is having an affair, not knowing why he's pulled from this project, doesn't totally understand. So starts telling people about what he's doing and telling people, listen, I can take you to a place where once a week they do these tests. So he starts bringing people to this area. They see these objects flying in these spectacular ways that we really can't do with any of our conventional aircrafts. And then Bob gets in trouble for that. Then Bob goes on the George Knapp show and starts explaining all these different things, presumably for self-preservation, because the best way to probably protect your own life is to go public with this and explain everything that's happening. And they could discredit you and make you look like a nut, but if they kill you, then it leads credence to your story.
He says he was never told exactly what he'd be working on, but figured it had something to do with advanced propulsion. On his first day, he was told to read a series of briefings and immediately realized how advanced the propulsion was.
The power source is an antimatter reactor. They run gravity amplifiers. There's actually 2 parts to the drive mechanism. It's a bizarre technology. There's no physical hookup between any of the systems in there. They use gravity as a wave, using waveguides, almost like microwaves.
It took a while, Lazar says, before he actually saw one of the flying discs. However, there were hints everywhere.
Right, they had a poster, and it looked like a commercial poster almost, like it was lithographed, and you could buy it at a Kmart or something. But they were all over the place, and it had the disc that I coined the term the sport model, was lifted off the ground about 3 feet at Area S4 on the dry lake there, and the caption on the bottom said, "They're here." And those are just all over the place.
Later, he got to see the real thing.
When I was let in, it was the first time I saw the sport model in the hangar, sitting down, and I was told
They could have walked me in the front door, but they purposely wanted to walk me by it. I was told not to say anything and just keep my eyes forward and walk past the disc into the office area. And I did, and as we went by it, I just kind of stuck my hands on it just to run it alongside the thing. And you know, that was about the smallest time. After that, I got to see it actually lift off the ground and operate.
But you also, in between that, you saw more than one.
Yeah. The hangars are all connected together, and there are large bay doors between each one. And there were 9 total that I saw, each one being different.
Basically, that's the shape of the craft. That's the thing I termed the sport model. Underneath this floor, there are three large cylindrical devices hanging from the floor. These are on mounts that allow them to completely swivel up to 180 degrees and in 360-degree rotation. Directly above each one is a small rectangular object. This is on the floor above. And these are the gravity amplifiers themselves. Looking down from the top, you'd have the center. In the very center, there is a small reactor. Surrounding this, in 3 equally spaced areas, are the amplifiers. So this is looking at it sideways, this is looking at it down from the top. And under these amplifiers, underneath, on the floor below, are the gravity emitters. So it's the reactor here, powering the gravity amplifiers. Gravity amplifiers output goes into the gravity emitters at the bottom, and the resulting gravity beam or anti-gravity wave can be pretty much put anywhere you want it to. There was another level up here. Now I had access and was permitted to view and look at the operation of this main level with the gravity amplifiers and the level below, the gravity emitters. There is a level above which consisted of these 2 areas that I'm not all that familiar with. I assume these to be some sort of navigational engine. People call these large black rectangular areas on the top portholes. I believe they were some planar sensor array that just took in information from the surrounding area, whether it be patterns of stars or what have you. And there was their version of a computer or something to make determinations here that takes input from those sensors and then let the craft know how to orient itself and where it was in space. So that's what I assumed to be up there. I don't know for a fact. Again, that was not part of my job, and I was only led to believe that. The center antenna is really an extension of the reactor in the center, and that's a waveguide, which allows the emission of the gravity wave, which forms kind of a heart shape over the whole craft. That's how it creates its distortion. These gravity emitters can be swung all the way up to 180 degrees. And this allows the craft to essentially stand on 2 of them and hover, while this one swings up and creates a distortion in front of it, allowing the craft to slide forward. So that's how their low power mode, Omicron configuration operate. The Delta configuration uses all 3, and unlike science fiction movies where you see flying saucers just flying along like that, they actually fly belly first. The craft flies along, leaves the atmosphere of the planet, it turns its belly to the destination, the 3 amplifiers focus in on the destination, and that's how it proceeds. So that's basically the operation of it and overall how things were laid out inside the craft. There were 3 seats in here, and just around the reactor. There were no controls, no buttons, no anything. everything has a nice smooth curve to it. There are no right angles anywhere. Everything is exactly the same color. And whether it's metal or some other advanced material, I don't know. Again, that was part of the metallurgy division. And all I can say is it felt cold like metal. But its actual composition, who knows, it was ceramic or, again, some advanced alloy or something along those lines. But the manufacturing technique is unknown, and certainly was back then. Today, 30 years later, there are things like 3D printing, and now that kind of begins to make sense, because it looks like this craft was just built from the ground up, like a 3D printer. And that would be about the only way to produce some of the things we saw, because there were no fasteners anywhere. It was just all together, not even a seam. So I don't know. How that was actually assembled is a good question, but I bet it was something along those lines, some gigantic printing mechanism or something we would consider a printing mechanism that actually put this together.
When you were allowed to go into the middle and look down into the bottom layer of this craft, what did it feel like to step in? Like, was it instantaneously obvious to you that we could not make this upon walking in the craft?
Yeah, it was really, and pardon the pun, it was really unworldly. Everything, again, was alien.
Barry took a candle, put it close to the mouth of it, lit it, a normal flickering candle flame, and then activated the reactor. The gravity wave came out as expected, and the candle flame remained luminous and stopped moving. And
which defies physics.
Yeah, because look, if it's going to freeze it, the photons should stop being emitted. If it's going to, change the characteristics. Look, how can the combustion continue to take place without the convection inside the flame? Because actually, nothing to pull things around. But anyway, if if you negate the gravity around it, why is it still pointy? How can it still be making light? And why doesn't it move? Well, I mean, from what Barry said, it's not just gravity, but it's also time locked. You've distorted the
frame of time.
Yeah, they essentially froze a piece of time there, and what do you say? I mean, it's empirical evidence. You're looking at it. It's not
You
a.
could see it.
It doesn't make sense that you could see it.